Hi guys, welcome. Another Tuesday evening. Hope everybody is well, and thanks for coming along. Let's put the pre-show on for just a moment or two and give everybody a chance to find their way. We've got a good number on already and a couple of new names, so welcome. Interesting conversation tonight. New guest, Aaron Scott. He did actually record a show with me last year, but he's back on tonight live, and also Edwin. So we're going to have an interesting chat about property-related matters and how we play the game differently, perhaps. So that should be quite fun. For those who've not caught up, this is the studio setup. Aaron is there, teed up, ready to come in. As you see there, I've got the multi-view. I've got my normal processes here in terms of controlling my content, the chat, and monitoring what's going out over there. And we're streaming via a separate streamer as well. And of course, the dogs are here as normal. I forgot to realign their bed, so they're rather spread out tonight. But anyway, that's good. Luckily, the camera is steerable, so I was able to steer it into the right position. So they've had their walk this morning. We had a lot of wind and rain the last few days. The good news, my new roof was fine, so that's good. And the dogs seem quite comfortable there now. They've dried out. So I think we've hit the 8 p.m. Time slot. Welcome to Otto, just popped in there too. And nice to see some other people popping in too. So there you go. Jason, of course, Alison, Cobra, and some others too. So I'm going to take the pre-show off. I'm going to run the start of show, and I'll be back in just a moment. Well, good evening. Welcome to this live stream on the 28th of January 2025. It's Martin North here from Digital Finance Analytics. Great to have you on this evening. Thanks for coming on and spending some time with us on this Tuesday evening as we discuss the property market and how to play the game a bit differently, perhaps using some different tools, some different ways of thinking, some different philosophies, and also hopefully not making too many mistakes along the way. Obviously, mistakes and property tend to go hand in hand for some people, unfortunately. So that's the nature of the beast. Just before I bring Aaron and Edwin in, let me just remind you, as I always do, that we don't provide specific financial or property or legal advice, general conversation only. We moderate the chat, but feel free to throw your comments and questions in. If you have a specific question that you'd like us to address tonight, if you use that Walk the World, that'll see it getting into my queue and it'll get to my attention. I don't follow necessarily everything that's in the chat because there's always so much going on. I've also enabled Super Chat though, and you can get your question at the top of the list using Super Chat, or indeed make a contribution to what we do around here. Always greatly appreciated. We don't do this for profit. We do this because we think there's a really important conversation to be had. And the fact of the matter is that property specifically, of course, is a very large part of the Australian psyche. So particularly tonight, this is very relevant. Right, let me bring Aaron in first. And just to explain that Aaron and Edwin are on the same Zoom connection. So whoever talks basically will show up in the screen. So Aaron, you're showing up. So welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks, Martin. Lovely to be back with you, and Happy New Year. I think, as you mentioned there, it was last year that we had our first chat together. So thanks for having me back, and Happy New Year.
Yeah, great. No, it's good, and very pleased that you've found the time. I think you're on holiday, but thank you for spending some time on tonight. We just Edwin, welcome. Are you there?
I am here, Martin, and yeah, happy Lunar New Year to you, Martin.
Yeah,
and Aaron and the rest of the world.
It's the year of the what now? Is it the snake?
The year of the it's the year of the politician.
Fair enough. Yeah, okay. No, that's very good.
Year of the snake. So the dragon's gone, and bring on the snake.
Well, we have a few snakes in the grass in Australia, but we won't get there straight away. Now,
there's a few snakes in Parliament House, Martin.
Exactly right. Well, let's sort of get the conversation going. And I thought that the reason this was a good conversation point is that because we have Aaron, who runs basically a service called Be Right Agent, and I'll get him to explain what it is in the moment. But it's quite an interesting insight into real estate agent fees. We also know at the moment that we've got rising listings. We know that in some areas prices are a little bit fluid and falling in some areas. And we also have got a massive amount of spruiking going on from the real estate sector and beyond, calling the RBA down, say get your rate down. In fact, Chalmers, I don't know whether you saw Chalmers' comments this evening or this afternoon, was a bit sort of non-committal. So he's not sort of completely sure that we're going to get a rate cut from the RBA in February, although they'd love that ahead of the election. So there's a lot to play for. And I think my observation, and I'll come to question in a second, is that the whole issue of property has sort of expanded to fill a huge proportion of Australian consciousness. And having worked in a number of countries around the world, I think that Australia is probably the most property-centric focused community that I've ever met. So I don't know, what do you think about that? But that's my perspective.
Yeah, Martin, I think that often when people talk about the cost of living, they talk about that and property synonymously. People talk about growing wealth and they talk about property synonymously. Rates moving down sort of 0.25% will be headline news if it happens, be it sort of in February or March or May. I think if stocks and bonds were to move down 0.25%, nobody would sort of wake up and shake the kids and say, hey, guess what's happened? We're going to be eating tonight because, the bond market fell or BHP's gone down sort of 0.25%. But yet with property, it seems to be synonymous with how we rate the sort of success of our lives and the happiness, and whether we're having sort of Wagyu beef as it is for dinner, or Macca's. So it seems to be synonymous with not only the psyche, but how we rate our financial health and how we rate our happiness. And I think that's a little bit sad, to be quite honest. It's we're talking about an essential. We're talking about a roof over someone's head, and there should be more to health, life, and happiness than sort of whether or not you can A, afford housing, and B, whether the RBA cut rates by 0.25% in any given month. And let's face it, that 0.25%, while it may be the headline for the next sort of week, after it happens, whenever it happens, it's not going to make a meaningful change to the hip pockets of most Australians, I don't think. A quarter of 1%. I think people revisiting their financial health, where they spend their money, arguably fuel prices probably, play as much or more week by week on the back pockets of Australians than a single RBA cut. I'm not saying that there won't be value to cuts or several cuts, and that won't make a cumulative difference. But boy, does it receive a lot of hype. And I think we're talking about probably $100 a week or thereabouts on the average sort of mortgage. Be nice, but if you're swimming and you're underwater, I don't think it's going to be much of a relief.
No, it is interesting, isn't it? The small movements in rates from where they are. If you think of where we came from 0.1% up to 4.35%, and of course the average mortgage for some people when they were fixed last time were below 2%, and now they're at 6 or maybe even more. So there's a big change. Edwin, why is Australia so fixated on property?
Well, you look at the mantra. You've got to listen to the mantra, right? And you've got the great Australian dream. Since we basically came to Australia in 1974, pretty much when you started making sense of things, that's what you hear about at the all around. It was the great Aussie dream. So it's some sort of indoctrination, and you also got in the USA the great dream of owning a property in the USA. The interesting thing, Martin, is that none of my cousins or family members or friends in Ecuador, we don't talk about the great Ecuadorian dream. The great Ecuadorian dream is for many to become a great soccer player, or because other things. And in Colombia, it's the dream of owning the white gold or some stuff like that. Becoming the greatest white gold distributor in the world. I don't know, but so it's you think about the language. You think about how people are brought up in a lot of countries. The countries that I know, where I've got family and friends, and I know very well, is what you dream about is not becoming Donald Trump and becoming the biggest or a Harry Triggerboff. You just the dream is to have a family, live well, enjoy life. Enjoy the salsa, merengue, cumbia, a bit of tequila and rum and a cigar from time to time. So it's how we've been indoctrinated for decades. And I don't know, is it because we're still growing as a nation? Is it because the majority of Australia is still unpopulated in a way? Is it because there's still grab holdings? I sort of sometimes think about the pioneers in many nations, how they went out and jumped on the horses and carts and everything else, and just went east, west, north, south, east, and west, just to stake out a piece of land. Are we still in that phase where that's why we talk about the Great Australian Dream, except it's obviously morphing into the Great Australian Nightmare if we keep on going the way we're going, as Aaron said, with the cost of living, and you and I have been talking about for a while. So I think it's because we're being indoctrinated since we've, like I said, since I can remember. And well, I've been in Australia. We've been in Australia for 50 years or so. So it's an interesting way to look at. The focus here is property. Put your fence, build your fence around your property, and whereas in a lot of other nations that as I said, that I know, it's that dream is more than just owning a house or owning real estate. That dream is to, as Aaron said, have that enjoying life, having a family, understanding what a family is. You could have, it's about that having a home, not a property. Building a home, with your relatives, with your kids, with your grandkids. I guess that's in a way that's a difference. And but now as things have morphed globally, it's everybody's become a dreamer of becoming a whether it's a Bitcoin mogul or a whatever wealth. It's just we've in a way, if I can say, we've a society has lost the plot of what value is. Value moving forward, as far as we're concerned, I talk about it with my family and friends, is the most valuable asset that we could have moving forward is our health, is our well-being. That's the most valuable currency that we can have, looking after ourselves and enjoying what we have because of all the chaos that's around us.
Yeah, it is interesting. I certainly have the view that the big problem, and I saw it through my surveys. I started running the surveys in 2001. And there was this dichotomy between property as somewhere to live, shelter and somewhere to bring up a family, and property as a speculative investment, allo shares or whatever else. And of course, back in those days, the share markets were relatively underpenetrated in terms of Australian assets, and different now with the superannuation that's flowing through and everything else. But there is definitely this tension between property as investment and property as somewhere to live. And one of the questions I quite often find on my one-to-one conversations is that the confusion in people's minds between making a decision from an investment perspective versus a decision from it's somewhere I want to put down roots, somewhere I want to build a family, et cetera, et cetera. And those two things seem to me quite often to pull in quite different directions. Erin, what's your perspective there in terms of property investment versus somewhere to live?
Yeah, so I wrote an article on that recently, and as I'm sure both yourself and Edwin and maybe many of the audience already know, once you sort of write something, you can submit it for media consideration. It was actually picked up by news.com.au, and we didn't get to choose the headline, but essentially it was "Don't invest in property in 2025." And the original submission, I can't recall if it made it into the published article. It basically said, look, this view does not apply to anybody that's buying a house to live in it. If you need to buy a house in 2025, then buy a house in 2025. But buying a property as an investment, I didn't think was right for 2025, and there were several reasons. The first among them, and the analogy often gets used in stocks and tradings, is don't catch a falling knife. And so when the market is on a downturn, if you're investing for gain, you don't want to be investing whilst the market is still falling. Otherwise you're losing money, and that's not even taking the purchase costs and the taxes and then the selling costs when you're sort of trying to exit into consideration as well. So all things being equal, you don't want to be investing when it's in decline. And Marty Fox from White Fox Real Estate, he was on, I think, the Today Show a couple of days after that, and he was giving out a number of bits of advice, and one of them was very much of a similar vein. You don't want to be investing in an area where people are selling off and getting out just for investment purposes. It doesn't make a good financial sense. The other reason is because you can't always pick the trends and where the trend is headed. And I think it was only last night both yourself and Edwin were talking about the need to get granular. And so often headline figures or somebody saying, "Oh, look, invest in Adelaide. It's going to be an awesome year in Adelaide," or "Invest in Perth. It's going to be great," or Melbourne's at the bottom of its cycle. Well, none of us know where it's going to be, and so you do need to get granular and just sort of picking up on trends around the barbecue, and not probably the right sort of source of advice for that. And thirdly, you need to consider your own personal financial situation as well, and whether you're likely to be laid off if there's a change of government. What are the rest of the market conditions doing? Are you borrowing from the bank and mum and dad? Are you getting in to an investment in a highly leveraged way? And regardless of what that investment class is, perhaps taking on too much debt is not the right mechanism to do that. So I think everybody should probably take a breather. And I know that's very contrary to the standard sort of invest, buy sort of position that a lot of the media conveys. But I think it was probably a sensible position, and I think there is and should be, and this gets back to your original question, a distinction between buying a property to live in, of course, and just buying for investment, particularly speculative investment sort of purposes.
Yeah, and just on the investment side of it, one of the things that I do in my surveys is to look at property investors in particular and go through with them what the cash flow story is on their investment property. That everybody quotes the gross investment yield, which is the combination of the theoretical rental that you can get relative to the price of the property. And, typically that's somewhere like 3, 4, 5, or even slightly higher. But actually the net investment yield, which is the combination of money in, money out on the investment property, is the one that's quite a killer. And of course, in Melbourne at the moment, there are a lot of investors underwater, and in some cases trying to sell at the moment. And what I find quite interesting is that property investors argue that, the capital growth is what's going to save me. So I don't mind if I lose money on a cash flow basis, because ultimately property prices will go up, and that means that I get capital appreciation, and that capital appreciation means that I win. Except that when you actually do the real math of, okay, so what were your entry costs to get that property in the first place? So that could well be stamp duty, et cetera, et cetera. And if you sell it, what are the exit costs? And okay, you can amortize some of those over time, and you can offset them against other tax things, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, when you peel back the onion and ask the question about what the real investment profile of many investment properties are, it's not uniformly good. And Edwin will know that up in North Ryde, for example, we've got units that are actually lower priced now than they were back in 2017. And then the rents might be up, but so the costs of having the property. So we've got a lot of property investors who are actually losing money on a cash flow basis, and with perhaps limited prospect of capital appreciation. Elsewhere, very different story. But it does seem to me that we've got this fixation that property always goes up, property investment is always positive, the government always has our back because of the tax breaks, et cetera, et cetera. But I do feel that game is probably one that we should question a bit more seriously.
Yes, yeah. Well, two sort of quick points to that. Look at, Western Australia did nothing for the last decade before the last couple of years, and there's sort of a post-COVID boom that they've had. And I still hold to the view that this is simply reversion to the mean. A lot of people buying in cheaper areas in Adelaide, in Perth, even in Brisbane, are still reverting from the mean. They're taking cash out of more expensive areas and moving them into those that have sort of had latent growth for the last decade or so. The second point is, and you just sort of touched on a number of them, but I'm yet to sort of publish an article on it, but I wrote a little sort of a set of notes called "How to Turn $200,000 into $75,000 in 12 months," and it basically just goes to show that if you purchased a property at $1 million and had that sort of initial $200,000 deposit, you'd need to also sort of cough up 40 grand or so in stamp duty. It's more in Victoria, of course, but you're not going to get that money back. And if you sold sort of after 12 months or so. That's sort of been about $60,000 of repayments over that period that haven't wiped a lot off your principal, because that will have been mostly interest payments. So you're sort of up to 100 and sort of, what is that, 105 or so, and then add another sort of $25,000 in agent fees. If you're paying in the order of 2.5%, and so suddenly you've magically turned a $200,000 deposit that you started with 12 months ago, and you thought pretty good about buying the place, and if it does nothing over the course of 12 months, and let's face it, that's a pretty short period of time, and you have to sell it for whatever reason, you end up walking away with about $75,000 when all is said and done, and magic. There you go.
Yes, your question, Martin, is the article that you wrote, Aaron, is you say, would you invest, or would you invest in 2025? Look, there are a number of sides, that you could go. You go down different paths because of different investment categories, different investment vehicles. We could talk about properties, different properties. Look, I've got stories of my own in terms of where a family member invested $100,000 into a property, and now they're sitting sweet that 100, obviously leveraging off the banks, given them a even after costs, after selling, after stamp, taking into account stamp duty, taking into account selling fees, marketing, everything else, and works done to the properties. If he was to sell tomorrow, and it's a market that's sought after, after a couple of gains tax, you still walk away with $450,000 to $500,000. So I think what we need to do is, or the way we look at things from a consultancy point of view is and what we've discussed with Martin over the years is understanding, and this is what Martin does, and which is what I like about the product that Martin has, and shares and with different people that consult for that service, and that is looking at not only the whole thing about investing, but also as to the why, the what, the when, the how, breaking it all down, and then getting a better understanding, and creating let's say a roadmap, to where you want to be and what you want to do. Yeah, look, and this is why our followers and our viewers are ahead of the curve, is because we warned the people as to all the WeChat chatterers that were going to jump out of the Melbourne market. We warned them 2 years ago, and because we understand the trends, we understand the dynamics of the different markets. Now you've got the Bitcoinians and the Kryptonians, jumping in. I mean, look, I wish somebody sat down with me. I mean, I was sort of speculating more than invested. 3 years ago or 4 years ago, playing around with, getting into crypto, trying to understand it, and I put in 5,000. I just looked at where I'm at the moment. I think I'm about just under 1,000 and dropping. But then others have turned the 5,000, the 10,000, 20,000 into hundreds of thousands, and if not more. So I think what people need to consider really is the why, how, what, when, and the whole purpose in order to put together that roadmap. Whereas if we just say, is it a good thing to invest or not invest, and that and that? I mean, I think we're missing. We're going to be missing the mark. And we could have top what I call those arguments, reasons. I mean, buying property and buying investment property, the difference. Get into all those arguments. But there are people that, let's face it, yes, I may sound like I'm spruiking somewhat investing, but at the end of the day, the lackluster government support and the and the lack of you know welfare in terms of housing and that over the decades, when the question is, in reality, let's face it, this is reality, is where would renters be if there weren't investors?
Mm.
And this is where I've also brought up the argument, if we're going to totally scrap negative gearing and deter investors, you only have to look at Melbourne as to what's happened there, where you could say in a way that's a litmus test of what would happen if government policies, what happens when government policies in the short term. There are people that are going to be suffering, and the ones that continue to suffer are the renters, because those properties that are now no longer on the rental market, and they keep on diminishing over the last 2 weeks. They've been diminishing by up to 1,500, and getting coming less. But the other side of the ledger of that coin is the people selling. Yeah, if you're going to be buying, you can buy. You can get into good deals, perhaps even great deals to buy as a first home buyer. But how many people are actually buying, are in a position to buy? So I mean, it is a very, very complex and convoluted game. I think what it comes back to is as I said earlier on, is come back to whether you're selling or whether you're buying. We're in an era, we're in a time where people need specialist services that could help them to navigate through the whys, whats, whens, should I, or is it the right vehicle? Otherwise, just sort of speculating, jumping in. Yeah, you're going to get burnt. It's a toss of the coin, right? But and I think it's time for specialty services like the ones that yourself, from a sales point of view, Martin, from a looking at things through the microscope and really, analyzing things in areas and giving an overview on looking at things very, very granular. From our services, helping people understand as well as to the areas, the types of properties and everything else. So, but if people are just going to jump in because, as Martin said, because they think that they're going to be saved by the price rises, well, they've got another thing coming.
Yeah, and it is. I think. Go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to. I'd say, look, I absolutely agree. I think there is a desperately needed role for good advice, and I certainly have appreciated following everything that Martin and yourself have done, Edwin, and the regular sort of Monday evening property rants to really just keep it grounded. I think the hardest part for us in terms of getting that article published was how contrarian it was, and it's just seemed like sort of, of the 100 articles that you see published, 99% of them are all about sort of buy now, and this is why it's a great time to buy, and I certainly didn't feel like there was a sort of a balanced position. If I was standing around a barbecue, sort of giving our kids advice on whether they should be buying now or not, and 4 out of the 5 people was sort of yes, it's right, yes, it's right, yes, it's right. I'd at least want a balanced view to come across. And then I think the other point that I was just thinking of.
Sorry if I can interrupt, but that's why you don't get your property advice from at a barbecue, or from your Uber driver, or your Uber Eats, or your taxi driver. If you're going to be getting property advice at a barbecue and from your Uber driver and that, look, unless I'm attending the barbecue, and I'd be very.
Oh, you're always invited. Yeah,
you're behind the apple.
Yeah, no, indeed, and I think it was only last night you made the point very nicely that people need to be considering their advice from multiple sources, and making sure that it is good quality advice as well anytime they're doing any sort of transaction as well. The other thing I was just thinking of as you were talking, Edwin, was just how high the entry and exit costs are for property as well, and again, sort of comparing things back to the stocks or bonds or something like that. If you were going to make a $200,000 investment, but it was going to cost you $100,000 to sort of get in and get out sort of either 30 days later or a year later or even 5 years later, you'd certainly reconsider, the cost of making that investment in the first place. And so I think I certainly agree that property investment is needed and supports the rental economy and everything like that. I wonder how sustainable these high transaction costs are, because whether you get it right or whether you get it wrong, it's going to cost you a lot of money, both on the way in and on the way out.
The winners, as Martin and I have been saying, the winners are the ones that got hooked on the stamp duty crack. And this is why the government, this is why they will push. And this is why now there's this big push. And we're going to see, and this is what I've been warning about, whether you take me at face value, whatever. I mean, this is just our opinion, our overview, and that is, we are going to get a tranche of investors coming into the markets because they need it. Without the investors, the high-rise developments aren't going to be built. The ones that both the Libs and the Labs are dreaming about, they're not going to be built, because the banks aren't going to fund them unless the governments are going to cough up a 30% stake in the development, which they won't. So where is it going to come from? It's going to come from the silent tigers, and it's going to come from the new kids on the block, because they are the ones that been focused on. And this is where Matt Barry and everybody else has been talking about the influx of so-called professional labor, that we need all these professionals, particularly in the construction industry as well, and in many other industries, and this is the reason why we are where we are with regards to the growth in population. But yet the government's increased demand, but the supply isn't there to meet it. So yeah, they are heavy costs, but the winners are always going to be from the local governments right up to the state and the federal government. So unless we have a screaming amount of supply, we're not. It's going to be very, very hard, in my opinion, to quench the beast that's out there. And if we're just going to be playing the game of catch up with the stock that we have on hand, whilst we increase the demand. Look, is there any reason why investors, speculators, why they shouldn't get in the market, regardless of the high costs? And but traditionally also, we also need to understand that when you're investing in property, it's not a short-term transaction. You take those. Because of the high costs going in and also exiting, and that's another. So we don't have the and I guess, like, if I was to make a point, an observation from 2023, 2024 on the investors that we saw, we worked with, we worked for, and that we converse with over the 2 years. The biggest thing is, one, they're not looking at exiting the market straight away. Two, they're looking for a more secure proposition from because they just don't trust the banking system. They just don't trust any other, and they're in an age group. The majority of them that we dealt with are in an age group where very hard for them to get into the bitcoins and all that. Hard to understand. So they're more from your traditional markets. And the other thing that stood out, a lot of the people that were looking to invest, and they were looking to invest close to their principal place of residence, which was pretty much not the thing to do, in yesteryears. But they were looking to invest, and the reason why was because they foresaw that if we continue going down the path that we're currently on, their children were never going to live close by, or even the grandchildren were never going to live close by. And that's something that many forget. And hence the reason why we don't see a lot of properties from the empty nesters and the downsizers. We don't see a lot of, apart from what you're saying, the transaction costs, getting in, coming, selling and then buying back in, because they don't want to buy back in 40, 50 kilometers away from where they grew up and where the rest of the family live. So these are the things that governments really haven't thought about, haven't discussed, because they're still, as I said, they're still fixed on that stamp duty crack.
Yeah, I wonder if sort of, let's say, stamp duty prices, if that was 1/10 of the price that it currently is, would you see 10 times the number of transactions? Would people be able to find the right home?
Yeah, stamp duty is 4.75%.
Right. So if it was 0.4%, my point is, would there be 10 times the number of sort of transactions going on, and would people be able to find the right home a lot easier, rather than feeling like, well, we bought and it's going to be expensive to switch again?
So you're saying if stamp duty was reduced, would that make it easier for people to come in? Is that, so I didn't get your question.
Yeah.
So but they've tried that. They've tried. You've got the stamp duty concessions. So you've got the stamp duty concessions, and all he does is just Martin's laughing because he knows that the stamp duty concessions, all that does is just lift the prices of property. As I was shared with Martin last night, and that was in the rant. That was back when I wrote an article. 2008 or thereabouts, 2010, as to what the actual what it costs a developer to build back then. A 2-bedroom apartment around Parramatta was the analysis that I brought out was that 43% of the costs post the purchase of the land was all taxes, levies, and duties. So this is where, they've tried that out. They've tried the stamp duty concessions, zero stamp duty. They've lifted the stamp duty concessions from 500 to 650 to 750 to prorated to 800. Then old mate Dom, the previous premier, we went all up to 1.1, and I said, we're going to the $900 million properties in your Borkham Hill, in your those areas in the lower hills areas, where we're going to go from 1 million to 1.2, and what happened soon after that? They climbed to 1.2, 1.25. Yeah. So concessions and that don't work. Taxes, eliminating a lot of the taxes, is where I feel needs to happen in order to make it, facilitate the developers, and stop focusing on your high-rise developments. But they won't stop focusing on that, because that is your fix. That is the quickest way that from local government to federal government is where you get all your costs in Globo, where before you would build a 20-unit block on 1,000 square meters. Now you can build 130, 140, 150 high rise with 3 basements, and there's that's why I keep on going. Saying so we go that they go. The policies and the changes are going to go to where they can get the fix. So the 2025, I believe that many are going to move towards investing in freestanding homes in across all markets. I'm talking from your $1 million properties or thereabouts, from your renovated delights at 800 out west to your $3-4 million homes in the eastern suburbs, because they are still very much in high demand. Apartments is a different kettle of fish.
Let me just come in here, because I think there's a couple of really interesting points that I want to make. The first is that if you look at the last 20 years, and, I started talking about property through my surveys in early 2000. That was when Howard was doing stuff and, giving concessions, et cetera, And I was at the time saying, you want to be really careful here, because at the time, property prices relative to income were reasonable. They weren't, excessive, but they were reasonable. But what we've seen since then is politicians only ever want to see prices go up. And all of the strategies that they've done and all of the tactics that they've done has effectively put property out of reach for most people now. If you look at the affordability question, it's out of kilter, and property prices have risen a lot faster than incomes. And that's put more people in the position where they can't possibly afford to buy. So there has been government policy, and you can go through the whole list of from negative gearing through to everything else. Second point, there was a massive outsourcing of the rental sector to the private sector. Previously, governments had some responsibility via housing commissions and those sorts of things to provide basic housing for people who couldn't afford it. Now, what's happened over the last 20 to 30 years in particular is that also been outsourced to originally mum and pop investors who were given tax incentives to provide houses because the government didn't want to. Over time, what we've now started to see is the government now saying, well, we need more structural support. So we've now got build to rent being supported by government policy and in government money to try and actually solve the housing problem. But what they're doing is they're washing their hands of a lot of the stuff that created the problem in the first place, rather than actually recognise that maybe there's a responsibility for the state at both federal and state level to provide housing as a human right. Third point is all these incentives, first owner grants, tax concessions, changing the thresholds for stamp duty, all of that is pushing prices up more. The Productivity Commission report from 2-3 years ago made the point that prices are higher because of government policy. So the question now becomes, will this continue to build and build and build, thanks to high migration, bringing more people in, creating more demand? That's all certainly feasible. Or is there a ceiling point at which we just cannot continue that to go, because basically income goes so far away from where property prices are that things are turning? Now, I would argue that we're still seeing some very early signs of maybe there's a bit of a change in the weather, which is why I'm saying that just cutting interest rates a bit won't make perhaps so much difference as people think. But my point is, the property game has been cruelled by government policy for the last 20 to 30 years, and they've built on. And of course, we had Claire O'Neill the other day saying, well, no, we don't want to see property prices come down. Well, why? Because, of course, there are more voters with property, either investment or owner-occupier or own outright, than there are in the rental sector. So there is a political agenda here which is shaping the game, in my view.
I was going to mention that interview, Martin, but I didn't want to get you in trouble again. So
I'm already in trouble on that. You may have seen, I actually got a message from her media people saying she didn't say what I suggested she said, so it was interesting. But
I don't think she said they wanted them to come down. I think the presenter said that younger people want them to come down, and she didn't agree with that, I think, if I understand it correctly. So
the issue that we're in right now is the fact, or that the government is in a bit of a quagmire. Or call it a quagmire, call it a conundrum, because accordingly they're saying that they need more people, skilled labour, to build. Right, so therefore you've got to bring in more migrants, more skilled labour. Where are they going to go? They're not going to go out to Timbuktu, and they're not going to go out to Whoop Whoop. Whoop Whoop and Timbuktu, for those that don't know, the Australian geography, that just past Dubbo and Bathurst. So they're not going to go out there. They're going to stay in the main cities. And then again, the people that will come under those pretentious skilled labour visas, they're really not want to grab a chisel and hammer and start chipping away and or laying bricks. They want to work more in the managerial roles. So that's the problem that we have. The second problem that we have, Martin, as you've alluded to also, is the fact that the quickest way for any political party to solve this issue, or to to calm the masses, you could say, is to build. But the quickest form of building in terms of turnover, turning over numbers, is high-rise development, which at the end of the day, in order to bring them out as quickly as what they want, we know that the next tranche of developers that are going to come into that to build from our industry insiders are not your first. In the majority, they're not your first tier builders. They're people that are going to come in, and there's going to be, in my opinion, and I'm going to get in trouble for this, that are going to be cutting corners, and we're going to have more and greater issues than what the building commissioner has been facing for the last 3 years. And third point, Martin, is, as I keep on saying over and over again, and have been saying for the last 3 years, since 2019, since the first promise of the 1.2 million, is even if we started putting shovel to the ground today, it's not going to be 5 years down the track, a best case scenario for a lot of these buildings to materialize. So what do we do in the meantime? What are people doing in the meantime? And this is, as I say, this is the quagmire that both sides have put themselves into, and they're going to get out. And the only way to get out, from my observation, is to allow that, whether it's short, medium term, to allow that money from overseas investors that don't know what they, and people that speculated heavily in the Indian property market and have had huge windfalls over the last 3 years. As we've been observing those markets, and the new money that's coming in from Vietnam. And I mean, there's a shitload of money that's being parked in your inner west and your Gladesvilles, Rod Points, and all these areas with the new kids on the block. And they're not going out to Cabramatta. They're not going out to your to those areas, to your Canley Heights and these areas. They're great areas to go and eat. The Vietnamese cuisine, but the young people don't want to spend the rest of their lives there. They're pushing more to the inner west. They're pushing closer to the city. So all this money that's coming in is what the government needs, and that's the unfortunate position that both the government and more so the people have been dragged into the shit show that the government's given us and cooked up from 3 decades ago and lost control.
Right. So.
Sorry, I was just going to add, Edwin, you mentioned the number of places required to build in terms of catching up as well. And I wonder, with migration as it is, whether there is a catching up.
You can play catch up as much as you want. We're not going to. It's going to be a long time to catch up. Look, what the answer, we all know. We all know what the answer is. In order to play catch up, you can't play catch up. You can't stop a dam from busting by putting your finger in the holes at the bottom of the dam with the leakies, or putting a little bit of arrow dye or whatever you want to stick in there. You can't stop it from busting. You gotta drain it. You gotta basically take that mass and that weight out. So the only way to start playing catch up, in my opinion, my personal opinion, you really have to put a pause on immigration. That's it. Bang. And then start working backwards from. But you and I know that they won't, because it's a political. Right now, it's a political cactus. It's a political. It's a prickly pear because we're coming up to an election. And as I've been saying in the Monday evening property rants, as I've been saying, is it's just a switch of numbers, switch of visa numbers and visa names and whooshka. You don't know what it's all smoke and mirrors. And both sides need to vote. And as Martin said earlier on, they're doing it because they need the vote. And if you look at it's funny because the one side, the left think that by bringing in all this, these high levels of immigration, they perhaps think that they're going to get that the votes are going to be swayed to the left, not knowing that their aspiration is to also build wealth and to own property here. So are they going to vote left, or are they going to vote right? And perhaps one of the biggest voting blocks that's been emerging over the last decade, as Martin said, are property holders. And you look at the charts and the figures as to the based on ethnicity, as to ownership of investment properties, and it's rather interesting. Where you've got the Chinese, Indians, Vietnamese, pretty much sitting on the top five, in the top five. So it's crazy. So that's so I don't know. It's
Yeah.
I mean, I do know, but we go back to very very much being specific and being whether you're buying, whether you're going to buy, whether you're going to sell, whether you're going to rent, unless you do all your R&D properly, you can come unstuck on all sides.
Well, let me take
And
let me take the conversation on a bit then, because I want to get into specifically the real estate industry and how this segues into what we've been talking about. So we know that governments are responsible for a lot of the issues, but I would also argue that the real estate industry isn't actually servicing us that well. And the first point I want to make here is there's a very strong connection between the real estate industry and the newspapers and the social media. And so there's a little bit of spruiking going on at the moment. And I just want to, this is just one I saw, right? The hidden gems where it's easiest to buy a home. And so they're talking about New South Wales suburban towns with the biggest increase in listings, as this is a place to buy. Now, I could put up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different articles, spruik. And one of the things that I'm finding really frustrating is that when I have my one-to-one conversations, a lot of people are taking what is in this so-called media as true and giving the full story. But I would argue that they're being absolutely misled by people who are hand in pocket with the real estate industry. So you can't really necessarily take what's being written as being relevant necessarily to the decisions you're taking.
No, and if you're just doing that, this is where you come unstuck. And you and I have met a lot of people that have made those decisions based on emotion, which is the unfortunate trend, which is the unfortunate the thing that dominates. Not all, but in the most part, the buying. And also selling, and to a point as well, renting. So this is, it's all convoluted. I mean, the biggest industry, which is the political industry, the politicians, they hold, in my opinion, I reckon they hold more investment properties than the real estate industry themselves, or they're pretty much on par. And I can guarantee you that ex-politicians, because I know them, because I know where and I know what development and construction boards they sit on. These were decision makers in zoning and in New South Wales government. They as you said, Martin. It's. As we said earlier on, it's the year of the politician. It's synonymous with the year of the snake.
I think as well, Martin, you're dealing with an industry that on both sides, essentially stamp duty and whatnot when you're well, maybe let's say all three sides. So stamp duty and whatnot when you're buying, while you're holding the property through the banks, and then when you're selling, it's all to do with commission rates, right? It's all to do with percentage of the property price. If you had an industry that was, and before everybody starts laughing, sort of hear me out, was fixed price purchasing cost, regardless of the price of the property, then there was a fixed price in terms of a bank doing its job and facilitating the transaction and the loan arrangement, and then a fixed price sale. Again, irrespective of the sale price, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter whether the property was 500,000 or 1 million or 5 million. The agent would turn around to you and say, "Yeah, I'll do a service for you. I'll facilitate the transaction. The price is the price." Again, it doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter what the value of the property is worth. You don't go to a hairdresser and they say to you, "Well, it's a percentage of the length of your hair is what it cost me to get it cut." Essentially, it's the price is the price, right? Even other service industries, it might be per square meter, and I'm not suggesting that there couldn't be a tiered system based on, let's say, the size of the house or how much effort sort of was required for the transaction. But by and large, if it was a 1,000 square meter, at $1 million out sort of in the middle of the country, or whether it was 1,000 square meters in Double Bay, essentially the fixed price would be the same, and it would not be tied to the value of the actual property. I know.
This is what I've been banging on about, that in the change that needs to happen, that Martin and I have discussed a couple of times on the Monday evening property rants, and that is to start cleaning up the real estate industry. Well, the best point to start is that, Aaron, and that is what I've been talking about for many years now, and that is having a fixed price arrangement, or a fee for service arrangement like lawyers have. You do a certain thing, you get paid. I mean, lawyers, let's say in general terms, lawyers' fees or solicitors' fees are $40 an hour, or $400 an hour, or $500 an hour, but that is charged on 6-minute increments, and those 6-minute increments need to be logged in order to charge the client. So that's a point. You could say it's a fee for service as opposed to fixed price. Many have tried to bring in fixed prices, but they've come short of the mark, like your purple bricks, and that because their game was a different game. We won't get into that. But you've got your fee for service arrangement is a better start. In terms of, look, the stamp duty scenario as to the percentage, the 4.75% that you pay for stamp duty on to purchase, I think it's criminal. You could say it's criminal, but there are certain industries that work very well in terms of fixed price. But I do have a bone of contention with what you said just earlier on, Aaron, where your analogy of your you get in terms of your hairdressing salon. I mean, well, I don't have the bone of contention because it's Dusty that has the one that has the bone of contention with you, because I pay $35 for a haircut, and the same hairdresser charges her $85, and she feels that she gets a lot less cut than what I do, and she spends a lot less time. So answer me that conundrum.
Yeah,
why do we even pay more for a haircut than men when they spend less time on the chair and there's less cut?
That's absolutely right. And I think in a way, firstly, I accept that bone of contention, and I think in a way you've agreed with me. It is entirely unfair, was my point, the point I was
100%.
making. That
100%.
very, very good. Yeah. So I think, and look, even back to the stamp duty, if values have gone up, if prices have gone up 20% in Perth, again, that stamp duty is being applied to the current market price, right? So are the roads 20% better over the last 2 years? Is the sewage service any 20% better over the last 2 years? Arguably it's not. And so between
Look,
land tax
I think
and
you're missing the
stamp
point,
duty
though,
and
Aaron.
everything else.
But you're missing the point, Aaron. You're missing the point. The roads aren't better. The displacement or the treatment of the sewage isn't better. But look, before we had premiers and politicians and they're walking around in Western Australia with thongs and a Hawaiian shirt and shorts. Now they've got to where are they going to make their money? I mean, how are they going to pay for their Armani suits so that they can be come on those discussions or those televised interviews on television? Come on, man. This is why this is why people get fleeced on the way in and fleeced on the way out in all areas in life and in real estate, right? Because I mean the same is also said for the real estate industry. Somebody's got to pay for the for the leases on the on the Mercs and on the and on the Beamers and on that, whatever they drive and whatever they wear, right?
Yeah, but not enough to pay for a pair of socks sometimes, apparently.
So the question I've got then is, the real estate industry is part of the issue. I want to say, though, that not all real estate agents are the same, right? There are some that are actually much better than others. There are some that do the right thing by their clients or the vendors, but there are others who don't. And one of the difficulties that I see when people try and actually engage with the real estate market is it's very hard to separate the sheep from the goats. And I guess, Aaron, you would say that price is one signal here, and we'll talk about rewrite in a second. But Edwin, you'd also say, I think that you need to understand that there are differences between different types of agents.
Yeah, 100%. That's you've got to. As you said, Martin, there are levels of professionalism. There are levels of understanding. You pay for both experience, and you pay for that transparency and that professionalism, and you could argue, or I would argue that in the most part, the agents that have come in over the last 10 years into the industry they built their business models or the professional outlook on hype. And that is not sustainable when the market gets harder, to get listings, where the market gets harder in terms of sales. But look, I've seen, in my lifetime, my experience as a real estate agent in the selling game, in property management, and acting as a consultant, as buyer's agent, in the 33 decades or so that I've been involved in the industry. I've seen 3 cycles, 2.5 cycles, and I've seen what happens to the industry, when you see the industry just bulges at its seams with new players, and then when the times become harder, then the industry thins out. That's the natural course.
So what do you think? What do you think the hourly rate, the effective hourly rate is, Edwin, for a typical real estate agent? If you were actually to say, how many hours does it take to sell a property?
Yeah. Okay. That's a rhetorical question, Mark. That's on average an agent spends. I've done this over the years, over and over again, and I track the commission rates. I track the performances and the sales of properties. I would argue that we're still at around 17 hours that an agent spends on the sale of a property, from obtaining the contract of sale to settlement. That's been the average commission in New South Wales, in Sydney, predominantly in Sydney, because that's my backyard. The average commission in Sydney currently sits between 1.4 and 1.5. Let's round it off to 1.5. That's the average commission across the board. I can get agents competing for my client's business when my clients call me to consult for them as a consultant, to help them to sell and to choose the agent that they want to, that I believe is going to do the better job. I can get agents to run as low as 1%, 1.2% without compromising. And I emphasize this, without compromising the amount of time that they're going to spend on the property, working with the client, and to obtain the best result. So on average, 17 hours an agent spends selling a home. On average, based on the capital growth or the median property price and the commission, I've worked it down to roughly between 1,350 to 1,400 that an agent earns per hour.
Okay, that's a good rate when you can get it. This takes us right into your territory, right? Because what you're trying to do is cast a little bit more transparency in terms of the rates that people charge, and the fact that you as a prospective vendor could actually go seek a better rate.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started our service, Bright Agent, just a bit over 12 months ago, and essentially it does what you've described, and also what Edwin described through his service, and that is basically that people can go on free service. It's all run through the app, and help people save money when they're selling by getting commission rate agents to offer their best rate. And you see this with services like Webjet or Trivago, might be for hotels and whatnot. And what we do is essentially get the agents to put forward their best rate, and other agents can see that rate being presented as well. They don't see exactly who is making that offer. And if they want to offer a more competitive rate, then they can update their rate to do so as well. So really gives people an idea for what's the best rate they can get an agent from. And it also allows agents to be appraised of also who else is offering what rate to try and win that listing as well. So we definitely see it as a win-win for people, but as you said, bringing more transparency and better rates to the commission service. We certainly advocate that people use a real estate agent. I think in probably 9 out of 10 scenarios, it makes sense to use a real estate agent. And so we're not advocating for do-it-yourself or anything like that. We definitely see the value that selling agents bring, but all we're asking them to do is offer people a really, really good rate, and as a mechanism for trying to win that listing. The other thing Edwin just touched on is there's lots of different characteristics for choosing an agent as well. So price is certainly what ours is based around, and it's the way it's presented to the homeowner in terms of price and ranking from the most affordable through to the most expensive in terms of price. But there's certainly other metrics that you can compare there. How long have they been in the industry? You can look up their license number. What company do they work for? Or what areas do they operate in? All of those sorts of things that you'd want to have a look at as well. So it's not exclusively price, but our point of difference in terms of helping people get an agent is centered on price. And as I think we've been talking about for an hour or so now, it's definitely tough out there. And if people want or need to save money on the way in and the way out, that there should be a mechanism for them to help negotiate better commission rates.
Yeah, very interesting. And certainly I think that anything that brings more transparency to what agents are prepared to do work for is a really good thing. If you do the calculation, as Edwin did, it still looks like a pretty good return to the agent, right? But the other interesting observation, of course, is they only get paid when there's a sale. So 2 observations there. The first is, of course, that means that they're always motivated to try and find a way to get a sale. And that begs the question sometimes, well, who are they actually working for in the first place? And Edwin has been chatting sometime previously on the rants about, to what extent are agents working for the vendor versus for the prospective purchaser? And it's quite confusing. The second point is that I've noticed more recently there's definitely a push towards auctions from agents. And I wonder whether the BeRight tool differentiates between an auction sale versus a private sale.
Look, not exclusively. We haven't sort of focused on that. But what we have tried to take out of the picture is over-promising on price. So we do ask the homeowner to select a price range or their ideal price, and then all of the commission rates offerings that are presented from all the different agents are based on that price. Ultimately, nobody knows exactly what the price is going to sell for except the person that buys it. And so you don't want an agent that's over promising on price and saying, oh, look, I think you can get sort of 1.8 million, when really that's sort of worth it sort of closer to 1.5, and then they're going to try and condition you down over time to say, well, look, the market's softening, and oh, well, look, we had another lot buyer lined up, but they preferred a property down the street. We try and take all of that out of the equation. You set the ballpark price for your property, and at least there's a mechanism for calculating the commission rates. Everything's benchmarked off that one price. So that's another area we're able to help people as well. They won't be subject to spruiking. I think it was only a couple of weeks ago, Tom Panos said, it's well quoted in the real estate industry that the biggest liar gets the job, and that's what he's referring to, is being able to overpromise on a sale or overpromise on the sale price in order to just simply try and win the listing. And so anything we can do to help you get a really good agent without being overpromised on price is certainly part of the service too.
Okay, very good. Now, here's a little question that sort of builds quite nicely off the back of our last bit of conversation from MCM. And I'd like to get a view of both of you. Are auction sales still the best way to gain the best price when selling? Edwin, I'll let you come in first. I know you've got a perspective on this, and then Aaron, I'll be interested in your perspective too. You might be agnostic simply because of course, the tool that you offer there. But Edwin, what's when you're asked this question, what's your answer?
Well, for me to answer the question without, let's say somebody came up to me that was looking at selling, without looking at the actual property itself, it's very difficult to tell them what's going to attract the best outcome. Fundamentally, if we look at the historical and the fundamentals of an auction campaign, we went from an 8-week auction campaign to a 6-week auction campaign to a 4-week auction campaign. And in some cases now we're sitting on a 3-week auction campaign where demand is, let's say where demand is very high. And there's two sides there. One would argue that the agents would argue that the reason why they shorten the campaigns is to keep the prospective buyers hot, and you go to auction early so that you can get a good result. Well, my counter to that view is, well, if there's such a high demand in the area, I mean, my sister's gone to an auction tonight, right? And now the agent, well, she was supposed to go to an auction tonight. She hasn't called me, so I doubt whether it even started, because when she called the agent, the agent had told her that there were 7 offers on the table prior to auction, and the owners were considering it, and she didn't know till this afternoon whether or not it was going to be held, which is a crazy position to be in. And I said to her, well, you would think that the agent would still hold the auction if there was such a high demand for the property But this goes to my second point, and that is that the agents are not looking for the best interest of the client. They're looking for the quickest commission to get. And the way that they get the quickest commission and the greater fees, hidden fees, marketing costs, other commissions, other fees such as auctioneers' fees and everything else that goes along with it, is to have a quick campaign. And that's what it's auctions gear for in the majority. Look, there are, again, it goes back to the property, the location, the demand. But in all that, whether it's a 3-week auction campaign, whether it's a 4-week auction campaign, whether it's a 6-week auction campaign, the common theme across all the campaigns historically has been, even in a lot of cases through private treaty and other forms of sale, historically has been for the selling agents to do the least amount of work and spend the least amount of time in order to finalise the transaction and move on to the next one. Now, I know agents that I've questioned them over and over again, and this is why they don't get a sniff at selling property for my clients, whether or not the auction campaign is the best way to proceed. And fundamentally, it's because I've asked them, and when I interview the agents, I'll put to them, so right, if we're going to go through an auction campaign, how much time are you going to spend in terms of opening the house, for doing the open for inspections? And in the majority, Martin, most of it is, we'll just do the one open on a Saturday. In my view, from my experience, from my limited experience of selling property, I always believe that the more time that a prospective buyer spends in a home, the more emotionally attached they get to the property, the more they start dreaming about what type of furniture they're going to be putting in the property. These are what we call the dreamers, the A-class buyers. What type of, what kid's which child is going to have what room. Then they start, before the parents even buy the property, the kids already start arguing as to which room is theirs. And that's the sort of stories you want to hear. And when they want to come back and measure up to see if the lounge is going to fit in the lounge room, all this sort of stuff, all these hints to get how keen they are. But you can't do that in a half hour, in a half hour open house inspection where you might have 10 groups of people coming through, and the agent's reluctant to open the property up during the week or have private inspections because they feel and they believe that that's their way of keeping that allure of urgency by corralling everybody to these half-hour inspections. So that's one of my takes is when I present potential sales to clients of clients' properties to selling agents, I want to know how much they're going to work on the property. And forget your half-hour open house inspections. If you're going to do one or two on the weekend across Saturdays and Sundays, Saturdays is your typical auction day. It's crazy in my view to have an auction on a Saturday when and those auctions that you've got, limited times or the most it's been proven over and over again that the time that there's more people on the road is on a Saturday between 10 and 1 o'clock, because you've got every man and his dog on the road trying to get to shopping, sports, everything else, just commuting, relaxing, whatever. So you've got all these situations. So it's I guess in a long-winded way, I'm just saying, like, it comes back to what your needs are. But unfortunately, I'm not saying that auctions aren't the best way to sell a property, but depending on its intrinsic qualities and what the outcomes are required. But the unfortunate thing is the attitude of the agents that have got carriage of the sale of trying to do as least as possible.
Yes, and I have the theory, I've often had the theory that the auction is actually the best tool for the agent to do as little as possible, as quickly as possible to get his commission, right? It may not necessarily be the right solution for the vendor, but depending on the circumstance. But I'm not sure you can generalize. That's really the point. I think it's really important to, to really tease it out. And what I find also, of course, is that quite often there are extra marketing costs which are actually associated with the auction, which effectively are over and above the standard fees, which is the other thing to bear in mind.
Yeah, all those hidden fees that I talk about. Yeah, and that is why the averages are so low in terms of hours spent on a property for sale, and so high in the cost per hour. And as we go down to your 3-week auction campaigns, those numbers are obviously going to increase per hourly rate, and decrease in terms of hours spent, when you actually need more time for the professional to spend. I mean, can you imagine, Martin, if you had a legal case and your solicitor or your barrister said, "Look, listen, I'm just gonna, I don't feel like working for you today. I'll just spend a couple of hours." I mean, you'd go look for the next one, right? But why people don't, and yet, but the interesting thing is, before you go to Aaron, is this: you've got a 4-week auction campaign or a 6-week auction campaign, right? But yet the selling agent will sign people up on a 3-week contract. Oh, sorry, on a 3-month contract.
Spot the disconnect. Aaron, what's your perspective here on the old auction question?
Yeah. Look, I've got probably two things to add. I firstly agree with Edwin that it's very dependent on the needs of the individual and the property, of course, which ties into my first sort of item. And that is, if you would have mentioned to the agent as you're meeting them or as you're interviewing them, and you say, "Look, I don't want to go to auction, for whatever reason. Maybe it's family circumstances. Maybe you don't want 100 people wandering through your house and tripping on your front stairs and all the rest of it." I think you'd probably find the agent said, "Yeah, look, I agree with you. I think private treaty all the way." And conversely, if you were to say, "Look, I'd really love to go on auction. I want my neighbours to see, a dozen people standing on the front lawn," you'd probably have the agent go, "Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking public auction, and we'll billboard at both ends of the street, and have arrows to your house, sort of thing." And so you'll find a natural narrative to play into what the vendor sort of wants to hear, at least. The second thing I would offer is properties, in a way, are always at auction. It's just whether the auction is happening behind Oz's curtain at the agent's desk, and you can't see what they're working the phones and going back and forth between, potential offers and all the rest, or whether the curtain's drawn back and it's all on display on a Saturday morning, and for better or worse, you do get to see essentially behind the curtain and see how the strings are being pulled. And I think some people will, clearly overjoyed by the prospect of getting more than they ever dreamed of, and equally, some people would be horrified. What do you mean that only one person out of everybody that clicked on domain turned up on in my driveway? How does everybody not love my home as much as I do? And so properties, in my mind, they're always at auction. It's whether the auction is happening at the agent's desk, facilitating offers, trying to work for that highest sort of sale price, or whether you, as you alluded to, whether they sort of sit back and say, "Well, we'll see you in 3 weeks, and we'll see what happens with an open curtain on the day. Maybe it'll go well, and maybe it won't." That might be a simplistic view, but I think it illustrates the point. I think that essentially auctions are happening at all times.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. And it's just a matter of how much is public, how much is private. And it does depend on the property, location, all those sorts of things too. When I sold my property in Thurrool, we collectively decided, no, we're not going to run an auction because the property was the sort of property where you had probably a few people come through rather than a lot. I mean, you don't want to have boards and things. So, it depends on the property. Well, we're coming up towards the end of the show, but Aaron, you did put some slides together, and there was one that really tickled me. It was this one, which was your predictions for 2025. So just walk us through your thoughts here, right?
All right. Now, clearly this goes against everything that both of you gentlemen mentioned last night in the property rant in terms of the need to get granular and not sort of take things on such a too high level. But I thought, given that's my first time on the show, Martin, for 2025, I would throw up and make public here a few figures in terms of what I think the market might do over the next 12 months. And I had a few sort of overarching statements and caveats there you can see on the left, including 2 cuts by the RBA in 2025. And maybe, but after I run through these, you can sort of just share with me how this relates to your base case that I know you run different scenarios for as well. But essentially, look, I think that Sydney will soften over the course of the year. I think we didn't really get into sort of have we reached our cap for the Sydney market, but I think if we're not there already, that it's pretty close. I think household stress is more than just mortgage stress, but clearly that plays into a large part of it. And even, as I said earlier, with a 25 basis point cut in the next month or two, I don't see everybody's hip pockets recovering in a very large way. Melbourne, I think, will continue to decline over the course of the year. I think both of you gentlemen made some comments on Melbourne last night, and whether you thought that perhaps things would level out a bit. But that's sort of my thoughts. I think there could be a bit more pain for the Melbourne market. Brisbane and Adelaide, I think, and Perth, incidentally, I think will all do well. But in my mind, we're talking of probably half the rate or less than last year. I just think that the growth in all 3 of those cities is not sustainable. I saw a couple of reports in the last day or two about the Brisbane market softening as well, and maybe even Edwin. I think you might have had something about the Brisbane market as well. But yeah, look, I just don't think that the growth in those cities is sustainable. Ultimately, a house in Adelaide is still a house in Adelaide. Whether it was a house in Adelaide last year, it's a house in Adelaide this year. And if that's what you want and that's what you're looking for, then fantastic. But if it's not, and it wasn't last year, it's probably not again this year. Vis-a-vis sort of Hobart, I think will have another weak year. And Darwin and Canberra, look, fairly flat to maybe some modest growth. Although you tend to find that the Canberra market does depend on election outcomes, and it's an election year clearly this year. So overall, I think we're in for another year of negative growth across Australia, and I'd be more than happy to jump back on at the end of the year or early into next year as well, and we can pull this slide up again and sort of put some ticks and crosses and updated figures and see how we go.
Very interesting. And you asked the question, how does it chime with my scenarios? As you know, I run 3, which is the the best case, base case, and worst case. You would be, I think, between my best and base at the moment. I think the RBA probably will only cut a couple of times, if they cut at all. I still think it's not necessarily a done thing. I'm not sure that February's on. I do think that Brisbane is looking quite a lot weaker. I made a show the other day about that, and Edwin and I discussed it the other day as well. Interestingly, that the momentum in Perth and Adelaide is also easing, so I'll be interested to see how that goes. But yeah, we'll have you back on later in the year, and we can pick the eyes over. The point is, I always say I don't make really predictions. I just talk about sensitivities, right? Because there are so many externalities. What's going to happen to China? What's going to happen to the US? What will the next politician, be it one side of the aisle or the other, do to the property market here? What will the RBA do? There are so many unknown unknowns. What we do know is that the growth in the average price, which is what we're talking about here, masks massive differences. And,
indeed.
And my takeout from all this, and Edwin and I talk about this quite often, is it's really important to understand that not all property in a particular area behaves in the same way. And so there will be some that will be going up, there'll be some going down, there'll be some where you're going to lose your shirt, there are going to be others where you can probably make some money, which is why I think, the message, doing things differently, first go granular, secondly, don't take everything from the newspapers and say they're telling you the full story, because they're probably not. And then thirdly, make sure that you actually negotiate hard with your agent so that you actually get the best possible service at the best possible price. And those will be some of the things that I think will be important in the DNA. Edwin, what do you think about Aaron's predictions there for 25?
I think my view. Look, I would hold a lot of it to be true if construction ramps up across all markets, and this is just general terms. If construction ramps up across all markets, but I get the feeling that they won't. And we're not going to see that. We're not going to see any substantive change over the next 3 years to 5 years in your construction industry, because there are a lot more that are going to hit the wall, especially when you've got a lot of top-tier builders across Australia hitting the wall, going bust, owing owing 800 million and with 1,000 homes on the go across many states. And that's just the tip of the iceberg with what we've already seen. And there's a lot more medium tier and a lot more subcontractors that are going to go under. So construction isn't going to get any better, not in the next 3 to 5, perhaps maybe closer to 5 years. So we're not going to ramp that up. I don't believe that the libs or the labs are going to pull back on the immigration numbers. So that puts another damper on those predictions. The other thing is, of course, is the amount of money that's going to be coming in from overseas, and our open borders policy that we currently have in relation to overseas investment into our residential sector has to ramp up in order for developers to gain that appetite, which is what the government needs in order to build the level of dwellings. I won't call them homes. The level of dwellings that are required to keep the natives happy, all of us happy. So in terms of the supply side of things, that is what we're going to focus on. As you said, Martin, we don't know whether Trump's going to offer for Australia to be the 53rd state of America as yet. That's one of my predictions. We don't know as yet, but it could still happen. So I can only go on what's presented to us so far, and those are the biggest factors of how a lot of markets are going to fare in 2025. And as I said, when you start drilling into those stories that come that are pumped out for emotional clicks or than the truth behind them, when you start seriously looking at the figures, the story that Aaron alluded to in Brisbane. I mean, the talking to the people on the ground, talking to the industry, the figures that we get from sites other than CoreLogic that we pay for hefty subscriptions for, that gives us more up-to-date numbers, which show otherwise. of what that story that was shared. But a lot of people latch onto those stories because they don't have the resources that we have in order to see whether or not the figures that have been told are true or not. But then you also got our other mate from that funny website, Space Chew or Spec Chew or Chew, whatever it's called.
Spacious.
Spacious. He said he had to put it out there that that was posted by that one of our followers there, and posted out that there was from the asking to the sale to the figures across Brisbane. There was across the board on average was $11,000 higher. So this is what we've got to question. But so going back to the fundamentals, no construction, high cost of construction and transactions and transacting, more immigration and open border policy with regards to investors from overseas, from wealthier nations than ours, just does not look favorable to those that are aspiring to get into the market and thinking that this, as Aaron alluded to, our mate Tom predicting the market, going backwards in his latest range in 2025. I don't see it. And the other thing is because our market, in comparison to the rest of the world, is very, very small, and the amount of money that's going to be flowing into Australia from India and Vietnam is could, in my opinion, could surpass the amount of money that our WeChat chatterers bought in from 2015. So because of those factors, I can only see the numbers won't be retreating, other than your certain areas where there's a high glut of apartments, and obviously your Melbournes, because they are heavily governed by and relying on government policy. But who's to say what happens? I don't know when the next state election is going to be held there, or when. Not up to date with that, but policy there has to change in order to for that market, because that's a beast of its own. Even the banks are looking at Melbourne as a separate entity to the rest of the of Australia, because it's just a very, very prickly pet. They're my reasons as to why my views are. I'm still sticking to my 11 predictions.
Excellent. Well, everyone, thank you very much for coming on tonight and spending even more time with us than the normal rant. I really appreciate that, and very interested to get perspectives from you in the context of Aaron. And Aaron, thank you very much indeed for coming on tonight. Aaron, if people want to find out more about Bright Agent, where do they go?
brightagent.com.
Simple. Wonderful. Okay. In fact, the link is also in the comments below, and it's also on Aaron's slide from earlier on. So thank you very much, Aaron, for coming on tonight, and great to see you on the live, and we'll get you back later in the year and compare notes. I think it'll be quite fun to do that. And as I always say to people, when you make real estate decisions, it's not the whole market. It's an individual real estate decision, an individual property with individual circumstances. So go granular and make sure you grab as much information as you can, and don't get too spooked by some of the high-level rubbish that's out there that is probably more deceptive than real. Thank you very much, Aaron.
Why not get an individual commission rate offer from an individual agent too?
Yeah, great advice there. Thank you very much. I'm going to take you both offline now, and I'm going to close the show. So thank you very much indeed for spending some time with us. Cheerio to both. There you go, folks. I hope you enjoyed that. Chat very worthwhile, I think, tonight, and I hope you found it interesting. The dogs are still here, of course. They've stretched out, so I had to move the camera a bit, but you can see them. I think they're ready for lunch now, so that will be the next task. Just to say that next week, Damien Classon's on. We'll be talking about the markets and what's happened, and of course, a lot's happened with Trump and the latest AI turn. So that'll be interesting next week. Thank you very much indeed for liking and sharing. Thank you very much for the super chats, particularly Jason. Thank you for the super chat there, and for the other comments that people made. Please like and share, and I look forward to seeing you in next week's live show, and of course daily shows recorded but still up every day. Meantime, this is Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics signing off. Cheerio.